Hello, and welcome to the Full Circle Healing Podcast, where we merge modern, cutting-edge science with traditional healing wisdom and everything in between to help you come full circle back to your original natural state of health and well-being. I'm your host, Michael, and over the past 15 years, I've helped hundreds of thousands of people find the information, practices, tools, resources, and experts they needed to find their way back to optimal health. Our guest in this episode is one of the leading doctors in the world when it comes to working with complex chronic illness, and someone my family works with personally, Dr. Eric Gordon. Conversations with Dr. Gordon are always fun, fast-paced, and cover a ton of nuggets from decades of clinical experience with the most challenging patients who struggle with things such as Lyme disease, mold toxicity, autoimmunity, chronic fatigue syndrome, mast cell activation syndrome, and more. In addition to 40 years of clinical practice, Dr. Gordon is engaged in clinical research. So in 2009, he created a series of medical symposia, bringing together leading international medical researchers and cutting-edge clinicians focused on chronic fatigue syndrome, Lyme disease, autoimmune diseases, and autism. He's worked with Dr. Robert Naviaux, who has done groundbreaking research into metabolomics, mitochondrial function, and chronic inflammatory disease. In 2016, Dr. Gordon was co-author with Dr. Naviaux on a groundbreaking study, Metabolic Features of Chronic Fatigue Syndrome, published in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Science. Finally, Dr. Gordon holds a deep respect for the individuality of his patients at the heart of his practice. The point is to carefully listen to each patient and correlate their subjective experience with pertinent objective laboratory tests to determine unique treatment guidelines that allow the innate wisdom of the body to overcome illness and restore good health. In this episode, you'll learn many clinical insights from Dr. Gordon's decades-long journey working with complex chronic illness, including Lyme, mold, and autoimmunity. You'll learn about the importance of fascia and body structure in healing and how our physical state impacts energy flow and symptom expression. You'll learn to understand the dance between pathogens in our immune system and why illness often emerges when balance is disrupted. And you'll learn how chronic illness is often driven by layers of emotional, physical, and environmental factors, and why individualized care is crucial in peeling these layers back. We've already booked recording for a part 2 because this one's fantastic and there's so much more for Dr. Gordon to share. So if you'd like a tool for helping to balance your nervous system and this immune dance you're going to learn about, head over and grab my Breathing for Nervous System Regulation ebook at rebelhealth.co/breathing and start some simple practices today. Let's dive in with one of the most experienced and brilliant practitioners out there. And we're live with the Full Circle Healing Podcast. I'm here with Dr. Eric Gordon. Welcome.
Welcome. Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, it's going to be fun. These are always some of my favorite conversations that I ever get to have with anybody because we both like to go off in random directions and talk about seemingly unrelated things that end up getting tied together in the end. And it's very fun for me, and I find it, I always learn a lot. And your experience working with complex illness and people with really difficult cases is pretty unmatched in the industry at this point, I think. And a lot of people will benefit from hearing our all over the place conversation about such experience. So, before we went on air, we were talking and you were telling me that something that you've learned in your experience of working for a long time now with complex illness, and we're talking about, multiple infections, dysautonomia, nervous system dysregulation, mast cell, mold, Lyme, these kind of things, is that there are levels to working with these conditions. And I'm wondering what you mean by that and how it's relevant for people to understand.
Well, when each time we learn about a new quote unquote, condition and, over the years, back in the 70s, everything was yeast, the candida. And then everything, and I mean, again, these vary, but then everything was parasites for a while. And then everything was Lyme, and then everything was Babesia, and then Bartonella, and then hypercoagulability and mold and again, from the candidate came back around his mole, and mast, and mast cell, and they're all hugely important for people. And unfortunately, many people have all of it mixed together, because underneath all of this is still probably the increasing toxicity of the environment, which makes us more sensitive to this. But that all being said, we have to always step back and look at ourselves, and not just ourselves, our body, how our whole system interacts. Okay. Because, each time we learned about one of those 8 or 9 subsets of why you're chronically ill, we tend to do deep dives, and we learn about the biochemistry and the physiology, and what feeds the bug and what kills the bug, and how the bug interacts with, various organs and various symptoms. And we go very granular on some of these things. Some of them we get into the biochemistry and physiology of individual organs, and molecules. And, especially these days, molecules, we have all these, great interventions, which is wonderful. But we have to remember to get into the details, but then to go back and go, how is this all put together? What is this happening in my body? And why are my symptoms? Because it's so. We look at this, I have to go back and, so we have the metaphysical levels, hey, and a lot of people will get stuck there. They'll go, oh my God, it's my karma, or, if I had better thoughts, I would stay healthier, or, and all true. How you see the world and how you perceive the world and how your brain takes in reality has a huge effect on your physiology. But that's what I'm saying. They're connected. They go round and round. So we have the other levels. So how you interact with the world psychically, emotionally, intellectually, all important, and how you interact with your body, and remembering that you have a body. Okay. Because so much of what I see is people who come to me who are willing to do, amazing psychological or psychic emotional work, and who are also really deep experts in, because many of my patients actually are experts in their illnesses. And I mean that and I learn a lot from them because they've studied deeply, what they think is wrong. And so they'll know the psyche, they'll know the emotional, and they'll know the biochemistry, but they forget about this, the place that, where this comes alive is in your cells, in your body, in the physicality of life, in your muscles, in your fascia and structure. So the bony structure and the muscular structure is often kind of left in the corner as like an afterthought. And that is the telegraph wires. That's the communication wires of the system. You've got your psyche, you have your deep, emotional experience, or some people very open psychic experience of life, but that has to be translated into the physical. And that translation, yes, happens on the biochemical level, but the information passes through this physical thing. And if these muscles and fascia are tight and don't allow flow, then there's a lot of miscommunication. Okay. And that is the source of a lot of suffering, because it just is that if your soul is seeing the universe, but if your neck or your thorax or your diaphragm is really, really tight, those organs are not going to have a good experience. Okay. And so much of the symptomatology of, especially in the post-COVID, the long COVID world, and we saw it a lot with the bugs as well, the dysautonomias and the strange, gut symptoms and or the shortness of breath. That's always a big one. The air hunger and all these things, they're tied in to the failure of nerve signals and heads forward, voice changes. Can you hear Can you hear the difference in just my voice is a little raspy this morning anyway, but I mean, here I'm talking and I'm still talking, but my voice has changed just because I'm changing, not just the airflow, but the airflow changed because my muscles have changed. So let me make this concrete for people, because this has been maybe a little airy-fairy as I'm developing.
I'm taking notes. I'm going to put it together.
Okay. That what we forget about in our busyness to heal is our own bodies most of the time, especially when you've been ill for a while and it doesn't feel good anymore to move. Okay. So that's a big problem, is that if you've been unfortunate enough, to be really ill with, some of these, issues that, especially the tick-borne illnesses, which often will flare the musculoskeletal system and cause local inflammation and hurt the nerves that go to the joints or the tendons. So movement is not easeful. We go into a downward spiral of restriction, and breath doesn't move as easily. And if the breath doesn't move as easily, you're not pumping, your fluids. And if you can't walk, my current most favorite Bodyworker, I don't know what to call people who do amazing hands-on work. Bodyworker seems so,
it seems to underserve what is accomplished.
Yeah.
Like the term. Yeah. I have Bodyworker friends that I have no idea when people, I call them like a wizard or a witch or like some sort of thing. And they're like, well, what do they do? And I'm like, well, they use their hands. And when I leave, I feel way different than I did when I got there.
Well put, because see, that people can sense changes in the tissue. Our ability to sense is so far beyond what we're taught or what's accepted. Yes, people go for a massage and, people press deep and they move and I got my tissue moved. But, when you go to, talented people, you can barely feel what they're doing. And yet they're transforming the interconnectedness of your fascia. They're opening up the places that have been stuck together without having, yes, you can get rolfed, and being rolfing can be really good for some people, but.
Yeah, but then there's biodynamic craniosacral, where I floated off a table and floated to my car, and she barely touched me.
And that's my point. Those are the people who really can do the magic, especially when you're ill. Okay. Because, if your body hurts with light touch, or, if you've got, kind of fibromyalgia kind of symptoms, or just, where really you have tender points all over your body, unless you can really breathe deeply and leave your body and deal with the pain, if you've got Navy SEAL training so they won't break you and torture, you're not going to ever want to go back and do something like rolfing again, because even very gentle, as you're describing, the biodynamic or cranial sacral work can cause trouble for sensitive people, because it opens things up, and you'll then begin to dump toxins, because where you store your toxins is in your interstitial space. Once you kind of use up your organ storage usually pretty quickly when you've been ill for a while, and that's why your tissues feel differently. If you develop a little sense, but many people just have it, touch your tissue and just feel what gives under your fingers, and then touch somebody who is younger or robustly healthy, and you'll feel the difference in like the give of the tissue, in the squishiness, there are multiple levels of texture, again, that are beyond what my ability to feel, but I can feel some of them, and enough to know that, yes, this is toxicity, and you have to move it out. But if you work with somebody who is used to working with healthy people, and they're not used to working with people who've been ill for a while, you may feel terrible after the treatment. That's always been when I've been having, quote unquote, bodyworkers or healers. The hands-on healers would be a better way to put it. In working with me for 25 years, because I studied osteopathy for a year, enough to get good enough to know that there were people who were a lot better, but I saw its power, and I can. So, hardest part.
There's a lot of traditional osteopaths here.
Oh yeah,
there's a lot. There's a lot less of other things. Like, it's difficult for me to find other stuff. For anybody listening who doesn't know, I live in Italy, and like acupuncture and Chinese medicine is more difficult to find. But traditional osteopaths, there's like 8 of them in my town, and I see one of them, and he's fantastic. And we take our little guy to see him, and so I think Europe has a lot more traditional osteopaths than the U.S. It's not a DO in the U.S. The DOs, just for people listening, oftentimes a DO like can work in an ER and is very conventional medicine-y and isn't like a traditional osteopath. I think you're referring to like traditional osteopathy, right?
Yes, I would. Oh, the osteopaths in America sold their souls to the AMA. I think I forgot in the 70s or something. And they had always been a parallel medical practice. They with the hands-on work as well as with the drugs and stuff, but they minimized the drugs. But they went into the quote unquote medical mainstream. And now, for many years, people graduated osteopathic schools and had almost no physical abilities.
Wow.
Now that's made full circle, and a lot of them are coming out with pretty good hands and training, but still many osteopaths in America are just working as MD, as though they were an MD, because they have the same training. They can be cardiologists, rheumatologists, the whole thing.
Yeah.
So you're right. The European trained osteopaths are much more in the hands-on tradition, and wonderful training of understanding how this body is put together and opening it up. But the point I was going to make is, if you've been sick for a long time, you don't want to get opened all up, or you're going to feel lousy. Because I said that's always been when people have come work with us, and they've been, trained, a lot of people, they're great, and they've been working with super athletes and, Olympians and getting their bodies tuned to perfection. And they walk into and they treat one of my patients, they would make them sick often because they would be very gentle, but they would just open up too much. You get, and when you dump the toxins, the reason you're sick is because you haven't been able to process them, get them out of your, get them through your liver and through the kidney and into your urine and stool and sweat. And you haven't been able to do that well. And so suddenly if we dump the whole, year's worth of garbage that you've been storing in your closet, it's not pretty. But bringing it back to what's important is that opening up this fascia slowly and beginning to empty that garbage will begin to allow your vitality that you may be developing by deep meditation to actually really serve this body. Because that's what I'm trying to point I'm trying to make to people is that we have multiple levels, and you can unfortunately develop some of them in isolation, and it doesn't serve you as well. It's nice to make sure that you're taking the right foods, and if you're ill, the right supplements or if you're old, I have to admit, but the older I get, I've realized that supplementation, even with perfect diet, is needed, because we live in such a absolutely scarily polluted world, but we don't want to go there right now. Let's
I have plenty of other episodes where we talk about that, so don't worry.
Yeah, exactly. No, it's this opening up all your systems, and being aware that you have to work on all of them, and you don't have to be perfect at any of them. That's I think the other big drawback I see in chronic illness is that I don't know. It might just be the longer I've done this, of course, the prices go up, and so the socioeconomic group changes, and maybe there are more type A driven people as that changes.
I think there's more type A driven people with chronic illness.
Yeah,
like I think the people that end up in your office are more likely to be type A people than the average population.
Yeah,
At least that's
yeah.
been my experience. And
Yeah, no, these are people
when that gets, I don't know what to call it, when that morphs into something that's unhealthy, it contributes to, I think, the development of chronic disease. But when you're talking about, when you're talking about you have to work on all systems or levels, but you don't have to be perfect at all of them. What are these? When you say you can work on all of them, but you don't have to be perfect at any of them. What are all of them? What do you mean by that? Like diet, body work, like supplements, like the mental, emotional side. Is that what you're talking about?
Yep. That's it. It's just take it from whichever, and movement. I mean, like you don't have to be. I don't want to plug another podcast, but I mean, like all these, like these super jocks and super. I mean, everybody. I mean, people. I mean, I'm amazed at what people do out there. I think if you move a few hours a week, you'll live. You don't have to be in the gym 6 hours a day. It's the self-defense mechanism. See, that's the other thing is, going to your point of how driven people often wind up getting sicker. Okay, is because the body, all life is about self-defense on some level, even though it should be all open in love. Well, it is open in love, but everything in the world is trying to eat something else. Okay. Just how it works. And, it's nice that you can have this open, loving relationship with friendly bacteria in your gut that are serving you and you're serving them. And that's wonderful. But at the same time, you're having this open, friendly relationship. Your immune system is also making sure that you kill the stuff real quick that's not open and friendly and loving, and so that ability to tell friend from foe. Okay. The sicker you are, the worse that ability gets. So, people talk about, I'm sorry, I'm making a little left turn here for a minute, Michael.
You're fine.
Okay. Talk about autoimmune disease. Okay. Because, you get autoimmune disease, it's not because your body suddenly doesn't recognize itself. It's because your immune system needs lots of, signals to tell you that something is really dangerous, especially when it looks like you. Okay. So that takes a lot of discernment. And the more ill we get, we lose discernment. Okay. Because when you are in a relaxed state in life and you meet a stranger, okay, you'll usually, everybody's different, but many of us will be open. Hello, what do you do? Where do you live? Small talk, we're checking each other out. Okay. But if you're, in a place that you don't feel safe, or if you've just been hurt and tired and angry and you meet a stranger, you're not necessarily going to meet them with that same, oh, how are you? Is it okay? It's going to be a much different relationship right off the bat. Well, the exact same thing is happening on the micro level. That's how your immune system works. And so when you are ill, you tend to over defend. And that's why you misread signals, and your ability to tell friend from foe goes way down. Because just when you think about vaccines, they stick in foreign proteins. So they stick in a protein that looks like the virus. Well, guess what? They can do that all day long, and your body is going to not care. You're not going to make a lot of antibodies. What they have to do is add these nasty things called adjuvants, which set off the alarm.
Off the immune system to get it to react to the thing.
To get it to notice the thing. Okay. So it's not easy. So you don't get an autoimmune disease just because your body forgot what you look like. No, you need a lot of alarm bells going off at the same time. The cells die, not by the normal apoptosis, but by some other forms of optosis. There's like 14 of them now. So but there are forms of cell death that occur when things are dangerous. And if the environment is really hostile and your brain is really trying to protect you, then your immune system can misread this, because it's got lots of checks and balances. It's not just that the dendritic cell, that's the cell that is the main one, like sniffing out the environment goes, oh my God, that's a bad thing. No, you have to have a whole pieces of your toll receptors and your other parts of your innate immune system active and activated so that dendritic cell goes, oh, this is a problem protein, and brings it to a lymph node. And even there, it has to go through lots of checks to make sure that we really want to react.
This is actually a problem.
Yeah, this is actually a problem.
Yeah.
And if the system is in fear all the time, if you're always trying to protect yourself, it's more likely that that's going to be a problem. Now, again, relaxed, healthy people still get terrible illnesses. Okay. So that's the other thing I always want to remind people is that everything we say about how you can stay healthy is just an approximation. Okay. Because I did geriatrics back in the 80s, and I mean, I took care of a lot of old people. And, yeah, it's true. Most happy people do tend to live longer, but I took care of lots of angry, not nice, anxious 80-year-olds who were still kicking around just fine when all the happy.
I've met more than a handful.
Right. Yeah. Happy-go-lucky, vegetarian, clean living, good loving people died at 50 or 60 from some horrible disease. So it's just, that's the thing I want people to remember is that we do things to optimize the odds of health, but nothing is a guarantee. So don't get carried away with yourself. You're not going to die earlier because you ate a bad meal. I mean, we're much more resilient. You might get diarrhea.
But being afraid of that meal is going to cause your body to react to it in a different way than it would be if you weren't.
And it may. See that
it could increase the chance that it does.
That's the point I want to make, is that I want to always be careful. Is I think having a relaxed approach to life definitely is a good thing, but it's not a necessary thing. I mean, it lowers the likelihood that bad things will happen. But we have I love to confuse people, and I don't mean, and I do it because of its complexity of life. Okay. Bullets, yes, are fairly 99.9% going to be bad. Okay. But after, those incredible physical impacts that we know are going to be bad, all the other stuff that happens, all the human interaction, it becomes, it just layers of fog. Okay. Of how badly that's going to impact you. What's going to pierce your heart is individual. And so don't live your life trying to protect yourself. Live your life trying to be more resilient is probably a better strategy, I guess is what I'm saying. And that resilience happens on all levels. So it happens on the psychic, it happens on the emotional, it happens on the physical. So have more movement, the more range of motion, the more strength you have. However your body will let you do it is going to give you more resiliency. Now, doesn't mean you're not going to get hurt and not going to feel really bad with some terrible illness, but the chance of recovery is just better. So what I have learned from treating chronic illness is that it's an individual thing. Okay. That's the difference between chronic illness and acute illness. When you have, break your bone, get an acute infection, happen to be in the wrong place at the wrong time, be tired, so you get a bronchitis or something. Those are acute. But if they persist after 3 to 6 months, they are then chronic. And to me, chronic means you. Okay. The illness is not about what caused it. It's now about what is maintaining it. And the maintaining it is how you have responded to the world, how your compensation. That's what chronic illness is. It's the bag of your compensations. And that's why when you go for help, it is more of a game of pickup sticks than just okay, we're going to open the book to a new page. No, you got to remove the pickup sticks one at a time. And then sometimes you've taken off enough of them and the system reconfigures, because that's the magic of being alive. Healing happens. So
I followed it. Look at what I did. I've got this many notes, and I followed the meandering to where it was going. And there's I want So I talk about this fairly often now, but I've spent the last 6 years or so, 7 years, more on the other side, the mental, emotional trauma, nervous system. And I've studied with a lot of people over there, and there's multiple studies that have been done, and this has been used as an example a lot of times in my trainings, and it's relative to what you talked about, where if the immune system, if how you said when you meet a stranger and you're relaxed and you're in a good mood and you feel good, you're going to be open and friendly. But if you're unsafe or hurt or tired or angry, you'd be more closed or cold or hostile. And this relates to the immune system in a similar way. And that the signal reading, I guess I would call it, becomes skewed based on the state of the nervous system in a way to where it would be like, this is a dangerous thing, or I need to react to this when maybe it didn't need to. There's been studies done that show people someone's face and they say, like, what is the emotion of this person? Like, are they angry? Are they happy? Is this friendly? Is this not friendly? Et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And the responses of the participants changes radically based on their state.
Yeah.
And it's the same photograph, like it's the same person, and the person might have a little smirk, and somebody who's in a negative state or agitated state, I don't even like to use negative, but like agitated state or defensive state, would see that smirk as being smug. And if somebody was in like a relaxed, happy, free state, they're going to see that smirk as being playful. And it's the same photo. And what you're saying is like that applies on by level. It's like that's like a macro,
I just
superficial level, and it goes all the way down to the biochemistry.
Yeah, and this is perfect. I'll end with this thing. People come in, they're sick. Long COVID is a great one, and we test and oh my God, they got really clear positive tests, and we have some fancy ones now that can tell me that Lyme and Bartonella and Babesia are all active. They're really active. It's not an antibody test. They're really there and they're reproducing.
Which test is that? Sorry to interrupt. I know people want to know.
Like there's the IGNX culture, and there's also T-Lab has messenger RNA. Yeah, they're messenger RNA testing. So when we're fooling that the bug is either actively dying or reproducing when that's positive. Okay. So, and like, wait a minute, that guy didn't get a tick bite, last week. He's been living with those bugs. Okay. The dance between his immune system and the bug's immune system has been in some kind of balance for maybe decades. Okay. And but now the milieu changes, the mood changes of the immune system, the, COVID or something else will set off. And so your body starts overreacting to the bug, and the bug starts playing nastier. It often will go dormant, but then when it comes back, I don't make it, it attacks harder. Or just when you start to try to kill something, it releases chemicals to protect itself.
Because why wouldn't it?
Yeah, they make you sicker. And so it's this dance back and forth. But the point is that there is a place where your immune system learns to play with lots of bugs that live in us. And the problem with medicine is that I grew up on the idea that the body, that other than your gut, the insides were sterile. Literally sterile. And we know now as we can, do, the next gen sequencing of blood, that's not true. And there's tiny little bits of these bacteria and especially fungus
everywhere
floating around in your bloodstream. But at levels that, but it so goes against the teaching that my generation and even to this day, this idea that the blood is sterile is still how we're taught. But it's sterile if you're going to do a blood culture, because it takes, a few thousand bugs per cubic centimeter to probably get a positive blood culture. But to get a next gen sequencing, you might have one bug, per 10 milliliters of blood, so anyway, it's just a fascinating world of interaction, and health is keeping your immune system happy, but protective. So you got to be a good mother and not a crazy one. Welcome, or a father. I shouldn't be sexist about it, but it's just very hard. And somehow the miracle of life is that a lot of us get an immune system that plays pretty nice. And when it doesn't, there's a lot to do. And in the last 5-10 years, I think the tools have just blossomed for returning people to health. And
the last question I'm going to ask is, you're talking about how the patient you just talked about as an example that has these infections, and then all of a sudden they get really sick, but then it shows that it's active and they haven't had a tick bite in 20 years. So like, why are they sick now, but they weren't sick then? And it's because the dance was kind of at an equilibrium, and then all of a sudden that changed and the immune system got aggressive, the bug got nasty. How, and you said there's a lot of tools now and a lot of ways you can kind of get it to go back to being in more of an equilibrium. What are a few of those tools or methods, or how do we help ourselves get, for the people that are dealing with that kind of situation, how do you get back into the point of I'll call it like a mutually safe dance?
Yeah. That's the point. It depends on where they need the work. Usually we need it on all levels. That's it. Lower the load of the bug often, but at the same time, you got to clean up the toxicity, because something is poisoning your immune system, and it's usually a toxin load. The infection got the system over and underactive at the same time, and I'm talking fast because I unfortunately got to wrap it or
yeah, we got to go in a minute. I just wanted to give them something.
But just what it is I think step one is always the Band-Aid. If there's a lot of inflammation, then we have to use herbs or medicines to kind of chill that a little bit, to control the overreactive immune system that's making people feel really bad. And then work on detox. And then you can go back and see if you have to kill things. But I think one of the issues when people, again, are acutely ill and with a nasty bug, well, yeah, we can kill them with herbs or drugs, and, depending on, your needs and your, but if you've been chronically ill, generally lowering the inflammation and then cleaning up the system are steps that are worthwhile doing before you try to kill stuff, because usually
I think people jump into kill stuff right away and tend to get a lot more sick.
It's the nature of the beast. I mean, the doctor as well. So it's a hard thing to learn. But so, Michael, I love talking to you. I hope we put things in. Yeah, I know we were a little confusing, but these
no.
I
think it was great,
and flesh out with a little more substance to like what to do along each one of these steps. Because
that's fine. We'll book for another episode. We'll do another episode for sure. But this was great. I always love the conversations. It's like the philosophy of healing, in a sense, a lot more than a lot of the biochemistry.
The details are forever. Anyway, I got to go.
So thank you so much. Talk soon.
Blessings. Thank you.
All right.